Thank you, Todd, for an absolutely wonderful Dharma talk. Um, as you were speaking, like you started talking about Amita Buddha, and I was thinking, oh, well, I will say that Amita Buddha is just you, but you said that. And then you started talking about mental representations, and I was thinking, oh, I'll just point out that everything we do is mental representations. And then you said that. So that was a really wonderful Dharma talk. Thank you very much. And since I don't have any comments on it, because Todd said everything that there is to say on these subjects, are there any questions?
I have one question that kind of ties in with mental representations. I think the I was struck by a line in the temple rules, um, the the one that said karma. If you recognize, I'm not getting the exact wording, but if you recognize that karma and mind are empty, then karma kind of then that is true atonement. Kind of karma disappears, and that's true atonement. Did I get this sort of understanding
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. And so I was. It's just so interesting to me because that notion of atonement is so different from the one that I kind of grew up with. Just in a kind of Christian context, that atonement, if you atone for something, you're really holding on to um, karma, as it were. It seems like you're thinking, oh, I did this thing and it's bad, and I need to feel guilty about it, and I need to say pray to God about it, and I have to just hope I'm not damned because of it, or it's just real latching on to something, a sin. It's just you're really focused on it, and so it seems like this notion of atonement in the temple rules and in Buddhism is completely the opposite, and it's just such a compelling and mysterious concept to me, um, that when you see it as empty, your karma is empty, then it disappears, and that's true atonement. So I guess really my question is, could you expand on that notion, that what they mean by saying that's true atonement when you let karma go?
So I think the way it goes, I don't have it exactly remembered, is something like if your mind disappears, your karma disappears. Or if your mind is extinguished, your karma is extinguished. That is the true atonement. So this is part of the precept ceremony, and a bunch of you all will be taking precepts international, well, I guess North Americanly or Americanly in the Americas, online on December, what is it, the 12th, I believe, at 3 p.m. Central Time, with a whole bunch of other people from all over the Americas. And so that is familiar to people who have taken precepts, and if your mind is extinguished, then your karma will be extinguished. That is the true repentance. The word uses repentance, not atonement. Um, so yeah, so it's like Todd said, we have all these mental representations. So we do something and it causes pain to others, and then we feel, if we're reasonable people, we feel terrible. Oh my God, I did this thing, and we want to somehow, make up for that. Usually we want to make up for that so people will like us, which is very low class, but if you really, you really want to make it up for these people you hurt. You don't want them to hurt anymore, whatever, so, and as you point out, Bon, then you can just sort of grab it even more strongly. Like that could become your whole life. I did this thing and now I have to make up for it for the rest of my life. But this thing, that's part of a story, and our mind made that story. And that's not saying that the suffering is not real, but it's saying that the frame that we put around it, we made that frame up. And if we hold on to that frame, then we're not liberated from it, and the other people are not liberated from it. Then we're all holding on to this frame which contains all this suffering of other people and ourselves. So if we can extinguish that frame, then that karma is extinguished. And then we know what to do. That's the true repentance. The true repentance is not holding on and saying, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. That's not the true repentance. The true repentance is repairing the damage. And we can't repair the damage if we're stuck in the pattern that caused it. So if the mind is extinguished, your karma is extinguished. That is true repentance. So as I said, that's part of the precept ceremony. So if you do something terrible, or even something not so terrible, acknowledge it. I did this thing. And then you have to find a way of moving on from there, which doesn't deny what you did, doesn't pretend it never happened, but to move on in a way that truly heals. And you can't truly heal if you're still holding on to the story. So and this is also this, if your mind is extinguished, your karma is extinguished. That means your karma comes from where? It comes from your thinking. We make this karma. And how do we use this karma? But also to understand that this karma is not our intrinsic nature. We tend to think of karma as our intrinsic nature. It's like in the old Donald Duck comics, and there was Gladstone Gander. No, it wasn't. The one who was always lucky. I think, was it Gladstone Gander, or was he the inventor? Anyway, there was one duck who was always really lucky. Just, he would walk along the sidewalk and there would be $100 bill. I mean, this would just happen to him all the time. And this Donald Duck, who, nothing good ever happened to Donald Duck. He was always losing his job, and he was raising his nephews and they never listened to him, and his girlfriend wasn't that nice to him. And, so you have Donald Duck over here, and then you have, this incredibly lucky duck over here. And you think of, the nature of Donald Duck is to have bad things happen to him. And the nature of whatever this other guy was called is his nature is to have good things happen to him. But that's not our true nature. So our karma is not our true nature. So how do you use it? When your karma arises, how do you use it? And sometimes really terrible things happen to people. Or sometimes people do really terrible things. And that is what enables them to help others. If you talk about like people getting out of prison and they need people to help them navigate the world when they get out of prison, the most effective people doing that are people who themselves have gotten out of prison and have managed to navigate that transition. Because the suffering that they endured gives them a depth of understanding that you can't have otherwise. Otherwise, it's just theoretical. When Stan was in the hospital getting his bone marrow transplant, and there was a little support group that met once a week for lunch of the caregivers, the spouses and the parents and the whoever of the people who were in the hospital getting the transplants. We could help each other in a way that nobody else could because we were going through it. So how do you use your karma? Good karma, bad karma, doesn't matter. How do you use your karma? That's what's important. Excuse me. And your karma is not your intrinsic true self. That's also very important. So thank you very much, Bon, for your question.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, Malik.
Judy, I have a quick question. You brought up the precepts, and I think the first phrase there, the first phrase in the temple rules mentions know when to keep them and when to break them, and know when they're open and when they're closed. I'm curious about the second part of that. I mean, I've heard the rabbit story and I've heard the hunter, and I understand that the world is complicated, and that you can't always keep your precepts. But I'm curious about that second part of open and closed and what that means.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I have to tell the rabbit story because not everybody knows the rabbit story. Or I don't know that maybe everybody does, but I don't know that. So this is a story that's often told during precept ceremonies, and the story is that the hunter is, farming in the field, and the rabbit comes hopping by, and then a hunter comes hopping by. Where's the rabbit? Where's the rabbit? And I always think of Elmer Fudd, right? Like, where's the rabbit? Where's the rabbit? With his great big gun. And so the rabbit went this way. So the farmer says the rabbit went that way. So the point is that the farmer broke a precept. He lied. But why did he lie? He lied to save the rabbit's life. So that is the true precept, is for whom? How can I help this world? That's the true precept. So he's holding the true precept by saving the rabbit's life. And I just talked about this, so some of you just heard this last week, but I'll say it again. But then there's a second twist, and the second twist of the story is the hunter comes by, where's the rabbit, where's the rabbit? And the farmer knows that the hunter has, 20 starving children at home. And they really need to eat this rabbit for dinner. And so the hunter says, the rabbit went that way. So the hunter goes and kills the rabbit. Then there's this third twist, which Stan was giving a talk down in Arkansas. And he was telling this story, and he was telling the two versions of it. And this woman from the back of the room, I don't even know if she'd ever practiced before, she raised her hand and she said, well, if I'd been that farmer, I would have just invited them all over for soup. So that's just cutting through, that's Zen, man. That's just cutting through. Rabbit, no, invite them in for soup. Don't get caught up in the story, So yeah, so that's the rabbit story in 3 versions. So this thing about when they are open and when they're closed, what that's talking about is there are certain forms of Buddhism where you take precepts and you have to hold on to them. When you take a precept, it's like you really, it's like, being a very super Orthodox Jew. You live your life according to these precepts. Just like super Orthodox Jews, they have like everything they do, there's a little blessing for it. So there's a blessing for brushing your teeth, and a blessing for going to the bathroom, and a blessing for everything. And, they have very strict rules about what they can eat and what kind of clothes they can wear, and, what they do with their hair and everything like that. So precepts in the Theravada tradition are very much like that. Like you make a commitment. You're going to live your life this way. That's the closed precepts. So, and I'm not putting it down at all. There's a lot of wonderful things about living your life that way, because then your own desires and your own thinking, it's like, oh, wait, I took this precept. Just like if you're an Orthodox Jew, it's like, oh, wait, I can't drive my car. It's Shabbat, So it's like your life is not lived according to your own desires. You have these sort of external boundaries that keep you sort of going in a certain direction. So that's the closed precepts. And then the open precepts are where the precepts are not really about the specific precept. Like not to eat garlic, for example, is one of the 48 advanced precepts, and that's one that monks take, and it's in the monastic precept, and so it's not like holding on to that. It's more like, what is the function, what is the purpose here? And the real precept is this: not for me. So open precepts means your whole life is not about what do I want. Your whole life is, how can I help? What is there to do in the moment? And, a lot of us, especially now, we're spending a lot of time alone and so on and so forth. So it's not like, see, should I open Facebook or Instagram? What will be most helpful to other people? That's not what I mean. I mean that the direction of your life, the general direction of your life is for you, for others. So that's open precepts. So yeah, know when to hold them, know when to let them go, know when they're closed, know when they're open. Okay? So thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
I have a question about, and I think it's Nembutsu.
Yeah.
And the chanting of the name of Amitabhu.
Yeah.
And we also do Kwanseum Bosal, right? And I imagine that's similar.
Mm-hmm.
And how, I wanted to know, because I read a little bit, and I don't know much about it, but I know that in especially Tibetan Buddhism, there's like, I think they call it deity yoga, which,
Mm-hmm.
somebody, the practitioner is trying to merge with that deity. Is that the same concept from Amitabhu and Kwanseum Bosa when we chant?
Yeah. So first, I should give a little bit of history here. So the Pure Lands or background. So the Pure Lands, every Buddha has their own Pure Land, but the popular one is Amita Buddha of the Western Pure Land, and I always have to add, it's not west of China or India; it's west of the universe. So it's and actually, something that's very similar is Mormons have a very similar concept that if you really sort of attain some kind of something in the afterlife. I mean, you're born, you live, you die, you go to heaven, and heaven after heaven, heaven after heaven, and then eventually you get your own sort of, what in a Buddhist sense would be called a Pure Land. So the Pure Lands are not a place of happiness. And it's not like you can go out to bars and restaurants and eat really good food and pretty flowers and great music. The Pure Land is a place of practice. It's really dedicated to practice. So your kid doesn't run in and need your attention. Your dog doesn't need to be walked. You don't have anything to do except practice. So that's why, I guess that's why it's pure. So a Pure Land. So the point of being reborn in the Western Pure Land is not so things are wonderful. Those are the heavens, like the Tushita heaven, and there are all these different heavens. But the point of a Pure Land, to be reborn in a Pure Land, is so you can become a Buddha. You can practice really hard and become a Buddha. So that's the notion of a Pure Land. And then you have all these different bodhisattvas which manifest different aspects, sort of positive, I guess you could call them aspects. Like Kwanseum Bosal is the bodhisattva of compassion. And also Buddhas manifest different aspects. So Amita Buddha, he's a Buddha, not a bodhisattva. Amita Buddha is the Buddha who has taken this great vow to save all beings, to help all beings attain enlightenment. And if they just really, with all sincerity, chant his name, chant Namu Amita Buddha, Namu Amitabhu in Korean, then they will be reborn in the Western Pure Land. But this word Namu is very interesting. It's the same word as Namaste. And what it really means, it's always translated as homage. So homage to Amita Buddha. And we do this 15 times in the morning bell chant. In Japan, Zen and Pure Land are very sort of antagonistic. There's some of that antagonism in Korea, but not that much because they inhabit the same training temples. So in Korea, there isn't this separation where from the very beginning you're either a Zen Buddhist or a Pure Land Buddhist. In Korea, there's a syncretism. Son, which is Zen, Pure Land, Chantai, Avatamsaka Sutra style Buddhism, all these Buddhisms come together. So that's why we chant the Nembutsu Korean style 15 times in our morning bell chant. And this word Namu, so we're not really saying homage to Amita Buddha. Namu really means become one. So it's become one with Amita Buddha. So it's just like Todd said, Amita Buddha is not separate from you. You think, oh, I'm just this very little genie, and I'm just a little poor earthling, and how will I ever, attain enlightenment like that? But no, you're already Amita Buddha, you're already Shakyamuni Buddha, you're already Vairocana Buddha, who's the Buddha who is coterminous with the universe, right? Infinite time and space Buddha, sort of imbues every molecule, every quantum whatever, every bit of space is imbued with that. You are all these Buddhas. You are all these Bodhisattvas already. So, yeah, so you can say, well, when I'm chanting, it's the small self chanting to this big self. You can think of it that way, but this small self, they're not two. They're not two. They're not separate. And it's kind of reminding yourself of that. You're reminding ourselves, yeah, that's who I am. In this moment, yeah, I am all those Buddhas. I am all those Bodhisattvas. And it's not like, I am all those Buddhas, but you're not. No, it's not like that. It's like we all, whether we realize it or not, we all together are all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There's this thing in the Middle Ages, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? And we think, well, that's just a ridiculous question. It's actually not a ridiculous question, because what it's asking is, what's the relationship between the material world and the so-called spiritual world? Like the angels are spiritual beings, right? They don't really exist in time and space. But what is the relationship to the physical world? How many angels can you have on the head of a pin? That's a very serious question. And this is the same kind of thing, How can we all be all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all at once? But we can, and we are. So, does that do it? Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
It's a really basic question, but I just realized
I don't
know what the word bodhisattva means.
Oh, yeah. Good question. So, there's this weird kind of hierarchy where you have the Bodhisattvas, and then you have the Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas somehow aren't quite Buddhas, but they're all awakened. And so the way it's usually explained is that the Buddhas have gone beyond everything. They've entered nirvana, whereas the Bodhisattva says, I will not enter nirvana until all beings have entered nirvana. In practical terms, it's more like the difference between an associate professor and a full professor, which is there's not a whole lot of difference, right? But yeah, so the Bodhisattvas also have magical powers. The Buddhas have magical powers. The Bodhisattvas have magical powers. The Bodhisattvas, all sort of, as I said, they kind of manifest different traits. The Buddhas sort of manifest different traits. But they're all just personifications. They're all just mental representations of whatever they are. And yeah, but technically, the Bodhisattvas are still clinging to a form of existence that the Buddhas are not clinging to, but they're not clinging to it themselves. They're sort of, like the captain going down with the ship. They're saying, I'm not going to, get to shore unless everyone can get to shore with me. And that's, of course, a common metaphor. Crossing to the other shore is a common metaphor for being awakened. So I will not fully attain whatever there is to be attained unless all beings have fully attained it. But we all have it anyway. So there you are. But yeah, that's the technical difference between the two. Thank you. And I guess Bodhisattva means awakened being. And Buddha just means awakened. So there's a little being there, that the Buddhists have given up. I guess that's etymologically the way to explain it. And if I've gotten it wrong, the videographer will tell me in the chat. So, thank you. Are there any other questions? We have time for one more question if there is one.
I have a question, and it kind of relates to both the what you were saying about the precepts, the open and closed, and the when to break them and when not to break them. And then also what you were saying of the Amitabhu practice of that, and that you're reciting that, but it's the merging of the small self and the large self. And I'm wondering if what I was thinking while you were talking about more about the merging of the during the chanting is the precepts, the quote unquote practice of the precepts and the quote unquote practice of the chanting, they both seem to be practicing or getting you to experience that middle way, that absolute. Well, I mean, I know it most commonly as absolute and relative, but I think in this school it's universal, and I don't remember what the other term is, but it's that. But that would be the small self and the large, the small self and the big self, and the open precepts and the closed precepts. But that there's this middle way where they merge, and I've heard you describe the middle way, which is different than what I normally have thought of it in the past. So I'm just wondering if that's really, the opening and the closing is the practice of the middle way, or pointing you to the middle way. Am I misunderstanding that, or is that does that make sense, or what?
My first instinct is to say don't make middle way, because you can hold on to the concept of the middle way, and then it gets between you and your experience. If you're checking, is this the middle way or is this not the middle way? Then you have a problem. So don't worry about middle way or not middle way. Also, it's I'm probably said, small self and big self become one, but that's sort of not really quite it either, because then you're making a small self and you're making a big self to merge, but there's no small self and there's no big self. So language just screws us up every time. So I apologize for all my bad speech, which you have just pointed to. And yeah, so there's two concepts of the middle way. There's sort of the general notion of not too hot, not too cold. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. That kind of, which is useful in life, right? But then there's the technical, philosophical Madhyamika, Nagarjuna style middle way. And that middle way is about, if you say it is, that's not correct. And if you say it is not, that is also not correct. So it is the relative. This is a watch. That's the relative. If you say, this is not a watch, this is the absolute. So what does that mean? That means that human beings make this a watch. If I throw it in the street and a squirrel sees it, the squirrel will not think that's a watch. I don't know what the squirrel will think. But human beings decide this is a watch. So you have the absolute and you have the relative. And the relative is like how our consciousness perceives things. And the absolute is how things really are. But that in itself is a construct. We make that, right? And so if you say the absolute and the relative merge, what is there to merge? We just made all this stuff up, just like Todd said. We just made all this stuff up. So don't hold anything, and don't check yourself. Is this the middle way? Is this not the middle way? Don't do that. Just right now. What is it right now? Right in this moment. What is it? And without naming it. As Todd pointed out, this, early practice of you name your thinking, at least you categorize. Oh, now I'm thinking about the future. Now I'm thinking about the past. Now I'm thinking about music. Now I'm thinking about physics, whatever. This just puts things in little boxes. You have to get rid of all of that. You have to get rid of the categories. You have to just, this real experience as it actually is, before we put words to it, to become intimate with that. That's really important. And when we become intimate with that, then the boundaries of self and other disappear. And that's when true compassion arises. Not a compassionate feeling, but compassionate action. Compassionate feeling is not important. But our actions can truly have the correct direction, which is not about making ourselves feel good, but really, how do you use this? For whom? That's a great place to end. And since this is a Zoom retreat, oh, do you have a question?
Yes. We sometimes talk about the beginner's mind, right? And when, and in a positive way. So, my short question is, well, I've been practicing for a while. Have I lost it? And how have I lost my beginner's mind, and how would I know? And the footnote to the question is, when I first started to practice, I can recall my like and dislike mind being stronger than it is today. That's certainly a part of beginner's mind. So maybe that's a good thing.
So a beginner's mind does not mean the mind people bring when they're beginning practice. A beginner's mind means a mind that is open, that has no preconceptions. So you come to something without any notion of how it should be done, or any notion of what it is. That's a beginner's mind. It's don't know mind. Don't know mind is a beginner's mind. Just, whoa, what is this? That's a beginner's mind. And when people begin things, they have a lot of that kind of mind. They also have a lot of other kinds of mind, like, am I doing it right? But, Blake put a video up on Facebook of his kid learning piano. It's one of those dorky little kid things where you play one note at a time, and sort of go ba 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 bum bum bum, and the kid was, William was concentrating so hard, he was really paying attention, and he was singing along with it, and like he was just completely focused in it. And it didn't occur to him that, this is a really dorky thing to be doing, kid. It was just like this pure kind of, I remember when I was like little, like really little, and starting to play piano, and that same kind of, you bring this real concentration to it because it's just so new. That's a beginner's mind. Okay, so thank you for your question. And we really do need to, because I got to give interviews to a whole bunch of people, and so thank you very much. We can stop recording.